Welcome back to another episode. Today I'm going to be talking about the power of intention, and I'm going to talk about it from two different perspectives. One is the perspective of spirituality. The other perspective is from science. And interestingly enough, science and spirituality over the last 100 years have intersected, meaning that a lot of the science has now validated much of the spiritual principles that have been talked about for thousands of years. And for example, meditation. Science has shown that meditation and mindfulness practices are extremely powerful when it comes to your emotional mastery, being able to think more clearly, even having creative thoughts. It's extremely cool when you actually take a look at this. So let's get into intention. Intention from a spiritual perspective is setting the intention for the things that you want in life, or the things that you want to happen in your life. And this goes, like I said, it's been talked about for centuries that those individuals who are really good at setting intention are the ones that create the lives that they want. And those individuals who don't set intentions are left with the things that are given to them rather than the things that they create themselves. So essentially, you're left with the leftovers rather than actually creating the life that you want. So that is a spiritual side. Those individuals who have very clear intentions in their life are far more likely to create the life that they want. From a scientific perspective, let's take a look at that. And here's what neuroscientists have shown, or what they are saying now, is that your external world is a reflection of your internal state. Okay, so what that means is the state that your inner world is in. And I do a lot of training with CEOs when it comes to how do you actually create the state that you want internally. Because what that does is it shifts your behavior, shifts your thinking, and it shifts your emotional state, and it shifts your energy. And all of those things impact your environment. So all of those things impact the people, the environment around you, even plants and even animals. Yes, it impacts animals and plants. And if you have a dog, if you're a dog owner, you realize this, that your dog is extremely good at picking up people's vibes. Okay. So by setting your internal straight, you influence the external environment, and then your external environment, whether it's the people or things or animals around you, then react to you. And you're doing this constantly every single second, right? You're going back and forth and throughout the day, however many seconds there are, you're doing that. You're doing it partly consciously, but mostly unconsciously. Okay. The vast majority of people do not manage their internal state and don't set intentions. Therefore, they are on autopilot, and the environment reacts to them in a certain way. And then they think, oh, well, maybe I wonder why that happened. Okay. It happened because in many cases, you haven't set your internal state. Now, the science shows this, the research shows this, and it's really phenomenal because I play around with this a lot. And I do this as an experiment all the time, where I purposely put myself in a particular state, whether it's interacting with people in my life or my kids, and I see how the environment actually reacts to me. And it's really interesting because this morning I did it from the intention of love. I did a love meditation, and I did a connectedness meditation. And the amount of love that I felt in my heart and surrounding me was enormous. And I did that very purposefully because I wanted to connect with my kids first thing in the morning, because I felt a little bit disconnected over the last couple of days. So I did that, and it was phenomenal, not only how I behaved, but how my kids behaved in response to me. It was different than most mornings because they're typically cranky, right? They're typically don't get me up. But it was a very loving morning for both myself, or I should say for all three of us, so myself and both my kids. And how does this apply to you? This applies to you because every moment you got to set intentions. Every moment you got to determine what you want out of the situation or scenario, and what the objective is, and what internal state you need in order to achieve this. Okay, so this goes back to even Sun Tzu's time, which is, if you've ever read the book, The Art of War, it's an amazing strategy about war, but it has everything to do with everything else in life. And what he talks about is every battle is won before it's ever fought. Okay. And it's won or lost in the mind. That's essentially what he is saying when he wrote that statement. So before people go to battle, the battle is won in people's minds before. And before people lose a battle, it's lost in their minds. This is very important for us to understand. So we can defeat ourselves before we even get into an interaction, whether that's with loved ones or the board that we're, board members that we're sometimes getting into a conflict with. Or we can have an amazing win and a number of wins and a series of wins if we set our intention towards the wins. And that starts with setting the intention for our internal state. Okay. So intention is the start. It is the place where everything happens. Okay. It is the core. And without intention, people flounder. And people flounder from a performance standpoint. That's why in performance, the first thing that people take a look at, whether it's a coach or a trainer or whatever it is what is the player's intention? How do we get the player to be really good at setting their intention? Because that's the first step. All the other technical things in terms of the sports plays or the speed that they have to be up at, that comes second. The first thing is always intention. So hopefully you get the point here in that you want to be more conscious. You want to get yourself off of autopilot because most of us are operating in autopilot all the time. And you want to be very intentional about setting your intention before you go into a new interaction. And how do you do that? You can do that by simply closing your eyes and visualizing the thing that you want from your next interaction, whether it's a meeting with an executive team member or loved one or interaction with a loved one, whoever or whatever it may be. You close your eyes and you set that intention. What is it that you want? And then you reflect internally and you determine what state do you need to be in order to achieve that. So if you're trying to connect with people, you want to be in a connecting state internally. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to connect with them. Okay. If you want to be in a more directive state, if you want to be able to direct people more, then you got to create that internal state of confidence, right? Because people won't be directed very well if they don't see you having confidence. So it starts with intention, and then it moves to the internal state that is required to achieve that attention. I want you to try this. Just play around with this today, and I'd love to hear your feedback in terms of some of the results that you got.